In the last lecture, you saw that when running the iOS app on an iOS simulator or the Flutter app in iOS simulator, we were greeted with all of these issues and it didn't even run. I mean, in the end, it kind of failed. So let's see that how we can fix these problems. And these problems are caused by you have the iOS deployment target is set to 8 in CocoaPod for Firebase, but the Xcode is saying that, hey, 8 is no longer supported, so you have to set to 9 or 14 or something else. All right. So let's go ahead and see how we can fix this issue. In order to fix this issue, we're going to go ahead and open up our iOS folder. And in the iOS folder, we're going to open up the pod file, which is right here. And in the pod file, we're going to go ahead and scroll kind of like at the bottom, right over here, line number 37 till 41. And all of these lines, what they're doing is they are setting up the targets. Now, if we go and see, the target is not literally mentioned anywhere. All right. I mean, over here, you can actually see that this line is actually commented out. And it says over here that uncomment this line to define a global platform for your project. Global platform for your project. So maybe we can even go ahead and put 9 over here. We can possibly put anything that is greater than 8. So let's go ahead and say platform iOS to 9, which is greater than 8, which is what all of this was complaining about right there. All right, let's go ahead and save it. And after saving it, that's the only change we're going to make, and we're going to see that if it works or not. We're going to go to view. Well, let's go ahead and click on first the Flutter file, like main.dart, and going to run and start debugging. And let's go ahead and see that if it runs by making that small change, or is it going to be complaining that, hey, we have something else wrong. So the best way is to just run the app, see it in the debug console, and hopefully we won't see this issue. Okay, but we still see this issue. You can see it. It doesn't really matter what we did. We still see that issue. So that didn't really do anything for us. Okay. All right. So what can we do other things? So I'm going to go to pod file. I'm going to go ahead and comment this out because this doesn't really do anything for us. And this part is the one that we need to change. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and kind of like comment this out. Okay. And then replace it with a similar kind of configuration. But in that configuration, one of the things that is hard-coded is that we have set the iOS deployment target to 9. Don't worry about writing this stuff. I'm going to give you all the exercise files so you can simply download it and then try to run it. Okay, after making this change, let's go back again, click on a main.dart file, and now let's go ahead and try debugging. So basically, we're going to run it again and see if it works or not. And hopefully, we won't be able to see that problem, or maybe we'll have to do Flutter clean or something, but let's see what happens if we try to run this with making that particular change. Okay, so we didn't really get that error, but we get some other weird error, which is something completely different. See that? It's not the same error that we're getting. It's a little bit of a different error. Now, this error is related to something called quoted. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and open up our iOS project. So I'm going to go to iOS. I'm going to say Reveal in Finder. Going to go ahead and open up my Runner Xcode workspace project. Always open workspace. Don't open the Xcode project, all right? So let's go ahead and open up the workspace project in Xcode. I'm using Xcode 12, so make sure that you have Xcode 12 or above. Now, one thing that you will note is that since we have now installed CocoaPods, we do have a pods project, and that's the one that we want to select. So let's go ahead and select pods project. Go to build settings right there. And in the build settings, right over here in the search box, let's go ahead and search for something called coated. Okay, when you search for coated, and make sure that you are selecting the pods project, there is warning issue which is saying coated include in framework header, and it is selected to yes. Make sure this is selected to no. Now, one of the things that you have to keep in mind is that every time you do Flutter clean, every time you do Flutter pub get, like installing a new package, this automatically changes to yes. So you have to make sure that you dive into Xcode and then you change it to no. Now, how would you know that it has changed to yes all of a sudden? Well, the program is not going to run, and it is going to throw some errors in the console, in the debug console. So you will immediately capture it. You will immediately say, okay, hold on, something doesn't feel right. After making that change, don't close Xcode because we may have to dive in there again and change it from yes to no again. So I'm just going to minimize Xcode and go back to my code. So if you see any error similar to this, which is saying pb.common h, pb encode h, pb.h, pb common, pb decode, then you know that it is something to do with the quoted headers, and then you can open up Xcode, select the pods project, go to build and settings, write quoted, and then change the quoted include in header or framework header from yes to no. So these are the steps you have to take. After making that change, let's go ahead and try it again. We are going to select a main.dart file, and we're going to go to run, start debugging. It's already hooked up to the Xcode simulator, so it's going to use that as a default simulator and try to run it. And making that change, it still doesn't run. Let's see what's happening. So it's still saying the same thing, which is kind of weird that it's still saying the same thing. I thought we already changed that. Let's see what's going on. It is, maybe I didn't save it. Looks like it should be saved. Okay, so that's the first. It shouldn't. Yeah, that looks. All right, so after a while, I was actually able to locate the issue. And the issue is actually right in front of us. Look at this. I'm accidentally selecting a target, which is ABSEIL, only one target. Now, we don't have to do that. We have to select the project, which is pods. So let's go ahead and select the pods project. And that's very important that you select the pods project over here and then over here. So now we can see all the different build settings for the pods project. So make sure that you are selecting this pods project right there, very important. And then make sure that this property is set to no. Now, sometimes what happens is that when you're running your Flutter application, it somehow gets reset and it sets back to yes. So always make sure that your Xcode is open in a different window or minimized, and this property is set to no and not yes. Very important, okay? So that was a mistake I was doing. I was accidentally selecting this target, which is ABSEIL. I should have selected the project, which is pods, and this project has multiple targets. So that's why make sure that you are selecting the pods project. And then you make sure that this is selected to no. Quoted included framework header selected to no. Okay, I've done that. Let's minimize this. And let's try to run this again. I'm going to go to run, and I'm going to go ahead and say start debugging. And maybe it will reset back to yes, I don't know, but we'll see. If we get the error, then we know that it has reset back to yes, and then we'll have to go back to Xcode and set it to no again, the quoted headers. Unfortunately, this is a bug in the Firebase, and the only solution I found was that you have to set it to no. Okay. So now you can see that our app is working fine in iOS, perfectly fine, right? I mean, we're not really doing anything with Firebase, but we can see the app. It's the same counter app, and we can increment the counter, and it works. So I know it is kind of complicated when you are integrating Firebase with the iOS app. There are problems with the Firebase package because I think it's hooked up to iOS version number 8, but Xcode saying that, hey, we no longer support iOS version number 8. If you go to the bot file, you have to make sure that you have this setting, which is basically going through and manually setting all the versions to version number 9 so that it can work with Xcode 12. And the most important part is going to Xcode, selecting the pods project, pods target, pod project, selecting the pods right there in the project, and then selecting this to no. And you can always search for quoted so that you will get this property name. So that's the most important part. But please keep in mind that if I install another package, if I run Flutter clean for some reason, then this quoted included framework header will again reset back to yes. I will have to go back and change it to no. But the good news is that this is working fine. We are in Xcode 12, and it looks like that our iOS part of our project is actually integrated with Flutter correctly. Now let's go ahead, go to the Android and see if we can run the same app with Android.